Welcome to the Be Better podcast with Lee Barrison. True stories from Bakersfield's business owners and entrepreneurs. Lee is a local real estate broker that sold over 1,700 houses in almost 18 years. He is a husband, father, owner, and lead coach of Infinity Real Estate Services. And now it's time for the Be Better podcast.
What's up, guys? It's Lee Barrison here with the Be Better podcast, and I'm really excited about this episode because I'm going to share something with you that's very personal to me. And it's not about business. It's not about, it's not about sales. It's not about skills, but it's about my mom, Kandra Barrison, right? And the reason why I felt that it's important to share this topic with you guys today is because this is going to be a story about my mom, right? And me growing up as an adolescent. And more importantly, I wanted to share this story with you guys because I think it may resonate for some of you guys out there that may be struggling with a parent that is hooked on drugs, right? And so, this podcast here is basically designed to really raise awareness for anybody out there that may be going through that same thing, right? So, anyways, my mom, Kandra, was a great, great mom. I remember as a child, I was heavily involved in Taekwondo. I was heavily involved in soccer, right? And my mom was always the soccer mom, right? She was always the Taekwondo mom. She was always the mom at PTA meetings, She was very, very involved in my life as a child. And I got to tell you that, I have a lot of good memories when my mom, when I was younger, when she was raising me as a child. And, it's really interesting because she never really worked. She was a stay-at-home mom. She was a homemaker. And she did a damn good job taking care of her family, taking care of her home. And, it's interesting, but when I turned 14 years old, my mom met a friend, okay? And, this lady showed up at the house one night, and it was kind of odd to me because my mom really didn't have many friends. She was just basically a homemaker, right? Anyways, this friend introduced her to cocaine, okay? And, lo and behold, my mom's addiction began at the age of 14 when I was 14. Again, I'm a single child, and, I don't have any other siblings to lean on. And so, it was interesting to me as a child because of the fact that, me and my mom had such a great relationship that I just found it to be very, very odd that she now has a friend. And this friend, lo and behold, introduced her to cocaine. So anyways, to make a long story short, as time went on, her addiction became heavier and heavier, right? She graduated to methamphetamines. And, it's really interesting. I'm going to share some stories with you as I grew up with my mom during these times. But, she graduated to methamphetamines and, she would disappear for weeks at a time, right? The only time that she would come home is if she ran out of money or ran out of drugs. And then she would basically be forced to come home. So, she got really bad with the methamphetamines. And at that specific time, I was probably about 15 years old at this time. But my dad decided to separate from her. He moved back down to Los Angeles. And he never really looked back because my mom's addiction got so bad, right? So here I was at 15 years old. I had a house to myself basically when my mom was on drugs. And the only time that my dad would come back into town is, on a Friday or a Saturday, buy groceries, pay all the bills, and then he would take off back to Los Angeles for the whole week to work. So, as a child at 15, I was very determined to help her get her act together. I guess the best way to put it, right? And so when she would disappear for weeks at a time, I took it upon myself to go find her, right? And then, she was pretty easy to find, to be honest with you, because she had a 1976 yellow Super Beetle Volkswagen. And, those are pretty easy to spot, I guess is the best way to put it, right? So with that being said, I would go out on my own, and I would go find her vehicle and find out where she's at. And so when I would find her, there were some times when she wouldn't come to the door wherever she was, located at that time, or she refused to come home. And so, my dad and I during the weekends would find her Volkswagen, and then we would hotwire it, and then we would take it home, and then obviously she would come home after that because she didn't have a vehicle, and she was all pissed off, because we took her car and so on and so forth. But it was kind of funny. So, but yeah, I took the responsibility upon myself at an early age to, try to help my mom, right? There was a time that, she used to hang out at this specific house on the corner of Sumner and Baker. And, one day my friend and I happened to have a 22 pistol, and we decided to take off and go find her. And so we found the vehicle, and we knocked on the door, and basically it was when we walked in, it was a long hallway, and this poo butt opened up the front door. I asked him where Kandra was, and he pointed to the door that she was, the room that she was in. And, we knocked on the door a few times, and we could hear people moving around in the room, so we knew somebody was in there, but nobody answered the door. And so, basically my friend had this 22 pistol, and, we proceeded to kick the door in, right? And when we kicked the door in, there was about 7 or 8 people on this bed that all stood up, and then all of a sudden my buddy came out with the pistol and put everybody down on the ground. And, I told my mom, come on, let's go, Kandra, time to go home. And she refused to go home. She thought I was crazy. She told me I was the one that was crazy, and so on and so forth. But, it was just crazy back in those days, because when I was, 15 years old, I don't think any child should have to, go off and try to find their mom, or go off and hotwire vehicles, or put people at gunpoint in order to get her to come home. But I was basically relentless on trying to get her right? There was a few times that she overdosed on me, at the house, where, I had to bring her to, So as time went on, guys, right? As time went on, she even got worse, right? She started using heroin. And when she started using heroin, that's when things got really, really bad, okay? I don't know how to explain it, but there was nothing of value in this world to her other than drugs, other than heroin at that time, right? She would do basically anything she could to take heroin, right? And so as she progressed into using heroin, her body started deteriorating. Of course, my dad was no longer around at that time at all. And I remember in the summer, it was summertime, and it was I was probably 16 at this time. And, I had a cell phone, and my mom had a cell phone, and again, she disappeared for a few weeks, right? And I haven't heard from her. And one day, as I was driving, I decided to, give her a call and see if she would pick up. And lo and behold, she did. She picked up. I asked her, "How are you, Mom?" She's like, "I'm doing great. How are you?" "Doing okay. It's been a long time since I've seen you, and, is everything okay?" And, of course, she made it sound like everything was just great. She didn't really have much of an excuse of not coming home. But, I asked her where she was, like, "Hey, where are you right now?" And she says, "Oh, I'm over at the Motel 6 over on Weed Patch Highway in 58. And at that moment, I flipped a U-turn, and I kept speaking to her on the phone as I approached Motel 6. And, I was just fearless on doing whatever it took in order to get her home, right? Because I wanted to see her. Anyway, so once I arrived at the Motel 6, I went into the manager's office, and I showed him a picture of my mom, and I said, you know what room she's in, right? And he basically, pointed to the room. She's in that room right there. And I proceeded to go to the room, knocked on the door. The blinds were shut, but I knocked on the door, and a guy, swung open the blinds. He just had Levi's on, but my mom was in the corner of the room, butt naked, right? And I told her to come outside, and he started yelling at me, saying, you want some of me? You want some of me? Through the window. And I told him, come outside. And so then, he shut the blinds, and before you know it, he came out the front door, and boom, I knocked him out cold, one shot. And then I told my mom, look, what are you doing? What are you doing here? And she says, babe, I'm prostituting. I'm selling my body for money to get high. And at this moment in my life, I knew things were just so out of control with her. Again, her body was deteriorating. She was doing things like selling her body to get high, and it really, really affected me psychologically at that time, because of the fact that, no kid at the age of 16 wants to see his mom in that position. And so, there was, I can tell you that after that moment, I would also catch her walking the streets, and again, prostituting in order to support her habit. So, time went on, guys, right? She ended up going to prison for about 2 years, I'm sorry. And then when she came home, she was sober for a moment. And then, of course, then she went right back to using drugs again. And, she moved in with my grandma Jeannie, that lived down the street from us. And she was just in bad shape. Again, she was in bad shape. And, at this time, I'm probably like 19 or 20 years old, okay? Set to get married. Mom's hooked on drugs. My future wife, could not stand my mom, because basically I would be so invested in her at all times that it really took attention off, my wife, the one that I love. And so there was a lot of conflict between her and I during this time, but my grandma eventually passed away, and my mom inherited some money. And she also didn't have a place to stay anymore, right? And so we convinced her to buy a house. And she bought a house down on Alder Street, Alder and 30th. And she lived at this house alone. And, life went on. She continued to use. I got married. My wife and I started, having children. And, basically, we kind of went our separate ways, I guess is the best way to put it this time, because I had more responsibilities of my own that I had to take care of, and my mom just wasn't one of those responsibilities as much as she was when I was younger. So anyways, to make a long story short, my mom continued to use, and she overdosed. And I remember speaking to her at the hospital, and she says, okay, I've had enough. I'm tired, right? She was just tired of being tired, right? And so, I told her, look, let's do what we got to do, And so she committed to start taking methadone, right? And for those of you guys that don't know what methadone is, it's basically a synthetic heroin prescribed by a doctor, right? Basically, it is heroin. Right, but it's legal heroin, I guess is the best way to put it. And she started going to a methadone clinic, which I agreed to take her to every single day, right? Just to make sure that she doesn't use on the way home or use on the way there, or and so on and so forth. And so I committed to taking her to the methadone clinic myself every day, right? And people that are on methadone, they can't just like take it and get off, right? They have to start you at a certain dosage, and then they taper you down over time, right? And I got to tell you, man, I remember getting into arguments with the doctor because he, the way he tapered her down was just so freaking slow. It's like a turtle, right? And I firmly believe that the reason why they do that is because it's a racket, right? That's how they make money. They want to keep you on this stuff so that way you keep paying them. And I'm just sick and tired at this point, right? So I told the doctor, listen, let's just be more aggressive on the tapering of the dosage that you give my mom, because we need to hurry up and get her off this stuff so that way she can get on with her life, right? And so we did. We started tapering her off methadone rather quickly, and it wasn't pretty, to say the least, to see her come off the dosage so quickly, because it does affect your immune system, it does affect your body. You're in a lot more pain when you get tapered off a little bit quickly or more quicker. But the thing is that, look, you know what, we could suck it up, we can do this, and that's the conversations that we had, and we did. Well, as she got down to the end of her cycle of methadone, I started talking to her about, you've got to start getting involved in church. You got to start getting involved with, groups of women, maybe perhaps that have been through what you've been through, or you need to get a job, right? She's never had a job, guys. And so that was a tough one. But you got to do something, because once you're off this, then you have to supplement or, substitute all the time that you have with activities to keep you mentally strong and surround yourself with good people, right? Or people that have been through what you've been through. And, unfortunately, she just never made that effort. And, I think the reason why is, number one, she had low self-esteem, right? Number two, she's never really been involved in scenarios like that because she was a homemaker her entire life, and she really didn't have any friends, and she really didn't, do things like that. But, she should have. And the reason why is because as soon as she got off of the methadone, I think she was clean for about a good 2 to 3 weeks, right? And I tell you what, those 2 to 3 weeks were great, and I still remember how clean she looked, how good she looked, how, the eye contact, all this good stuff. And, she was pretty, but that stint of being clean for 2 to 3 weeks didn't last long, right? She went right back and relapsed and started using heroin again. And I remember shortly after she relapsed and started using heroin again, I remember getting a call from KMC, the hospital, and they said that your mom is overdosed and you need to come see her because she's in really bad shape. And this is kind of a pivotal time in my life, in my relationship with my mom at this point, because of the fact that I've done every single thing that I possibly can to keep this woman sober, and it just wasn't enough, And I remember specifically driving to the hospital with my son Noah, and we entered the hospital room, and she was in really bad shape. She actually paralyzed her I think it was her left leg, and the doctor says that this is not going to go away. She's going to be paralyzed for the rest of her life, right? And I think, that really took a mental toll on her, knowing that she's put herself in this situation. But I was so pissed off. I was so pissed off at the fact that I've done so much for this woman, and she can't love herself enough to stay sober for herself, for her grandkids, and it was just frustrating, and I remember specifically telling her at that time that I don't ever want to hear from you again. Don't ever call me again. Don't ever write me. Don't ever text me. You're never ever going to see your grandkids again until you sober up. And I walked out of the room that day. And that was the last time I ever saw her alive. And, I regret telling her that because of the fact that I was the only person out there that still believed in her. Her family all let her go. My dad let her go. And I was the only one left. And so at that moment, I told her, don't ever call, don't ever text, see you later. And my son and I, we left the hospital. And I remember that her and we didn't talk for probably a good 2 months. And the holidays were coming shortly, right? The holidays were coming up, and this is in December. And I remember writing her a letter because I haven't spoken to her. And obviously she's on the forefront of my mind every day. And so I just wrote her a letter apologizing, for what I said at the hospital room that day, and reminding her that I love her and that I'm still on her team, and that I'm still in her corner, and I just want you to get better. That's all I care about. And I wrote her that letter hoping that I would get a phone call from her, right? So I popped it in the mail. And during the same time, at this time, I never really read books, right? And at Valley Bible, Ron Vietti, the pastor there, brought up a book called Heaven and the Afterlife. And it was about, 30 near-death experiences of people that have actually witnessed hell or witnessed heaven, and then they came back to tell about it, right? And man, I just read this book from front to back, probably in a week or two, right? For some reason, I was fascinated by this book. And, I really think that was God telling me that there is life after death, right? Because it was ironic because I don't read books right now, right? But for some reason, I was heavily invested in reading this book, front to back, and it was basically just a reminder from God reminding me that there is life after death, right? And during this same time, right, during this 2-3 week period, I was having a reoccurring dream every single night, and it was the same exact dream every single night. And the dream went like this. I would be somewhere and I would call her, and I wouldn't get an answer. So then I would get in my car and then I would drive to her house, and then I would. She used to have a mail slip in her front door where the postman would stick mail in, and I would look through that mail slip, and she'd be laying there, dead. And then I would wake up, right? And then the next night I would have the same dream, recurring. Well, I wrote her this letter, apologizing for my behavior and telling her how much I love her and I'm still on her team and so on and so forth. And I hadn't heard from her. I hadn't heard from her in probably a good 2 weeks after writing that letter. And, this is on December 17th. I mean, the holidays are right around the corner. She hasn't responded. So I figured, you know what? I'm going to reach out to her, right? And so basically what happened was I remember I was at my office, and I picked up the phone and called her. I didn't get an answer. And then I got in my car and I started driving to her house. And on the way to her house, I started thinking about that dream. And I already started thinking, okay, this is going to happen, right? And I remember going to her house, knocked on the door, no answer. I didn't have to look through the mail slip because I had keys to her house, so I opened up the front door, and sure enough, she was laying right where she was in my dream that I was having for those 2 to 3 weeks. And that letter was on her countertop, on her counter, and it wasn't open. It was there. Like she went out and got the mail, or she got the mail, put it on the counter, and never got a chance to read those words of mine. And so, I guess this story is basically something that I wanted to share with you guys out there. I think it's important to share these type of stories because of the fact that this stuff really happens, and if you're a parent out there, and you're using drugs and you have children, if you can't do it for yourself, do it for them, because I can tell you right now that I think about my mom every single day, and I miss her a lot, and your kids don't deserve to have a parent that's hooked on drugs. And if you have a problem with drugs, then I would recommend getting help, okay? And again, if you can't do it for yourself, do it for your kids. And, also this video is to raise awareness for anybody out there that may be a child, with a parent that's hooked on drugs. And just to let you guys know that you're not alone. I've been through it, and it sucks, it really does. But it's all about perspective, and again, if you have a parent that's out there on drugs, then reach out to me, and I'd be happy to help you and get through this, if you need help. All right. So with that being said, I'm going to close this podcast, but I hope this resonated for some of you guys. It's all about being real, and this is a real story of mine that I wanted to share with you guys. I appreciate you guys listening to the Be Better podcast, and certainly hope that you guys are getting something out of this podcast. If you need to reach out to me, go to BeBetterAgents.com, or you can find me on Facebook at Lee Barrison. I'm the only guy on Facebook with that same name. So with that being said, I hope everybody has a great and powerful day, and we'll talk to you soon.